So welcome everyone. My name is Erica Flores, a resource specialist at the Long Island Arbor, and I'm actually joined today by my other Arbor colleagues from the mid-state or Midwest? Midwest Arbor. Okay, I knew it was mid at the beginning. So it's really a great opportunity to hear from, another Arbor representation. So just a few reminders. I'm sure you've heard this already today, but please leave yourself muted unless, of course, you're participating or if we're in some sort of interactive part of the session. When it comes to the videos, we're asking them off just because it helps with the bandwidth. But I see in the chat, no problem if you're stuck where you are, that's okay. And again, utilize the chat. It really helps to develop that camaraderie and sort of like a collegial circle, if you will. And of course, last but not least, have a great time during the session. Just a reminder about our YouTube channel. We're going to be posting all of these videos. So we realize you can't be in 3 different sessions at once. And so you will be able to watch the other sessions from today's conference. Probably within the next couple of days or so, things should start uploading to the YouTube. But also please tweet and tag us. And again, our website, in case you are not familiar, and you can join our mailing list there. And with that, I want to just introduce our presenters today. We have Nicole Bell and Shauna Sweet, and I'm going to stop sharing so that they can take over.
Hey, awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Erica. If you can, just real quick, we want to see who's here. Go ahead and share your name, your subject or grade level, your school or district, anything that will help us to know who you are in the chat. I wish we had enough time for everyone to go around and introduce themselves, but fortunately,
you missed that about live sessions. So Oceanside, K through 6. Oh, it's going pretty fast.
Yeah.
We have math and science 6 through 8. Elizabeth Russell from Wayne. Hi, Elizabeth.
Yay. Somebody from our region. Awesome. Oceanside. Oh, wow.
Quite a few ELL teachers.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, go ahead and keep adding and we'll check that out when you can. As Erica said, we do have Twitter. So I think if you haven't seen the hashtag, share anything that you learned today, use the hashtag LITI 2021. You can find our Arbor, and we're located in the Rochester region, so the Midwest part of the state. You can find us at Midwest Arbor, and there's Twitter handles on there for Nicole. She's Nikki Bell, and mine is at Sweet. Welcome. We are going to be talking about co-planning today. And the topic of this session really came about because of some resources that were created from the Long Island Arbor. And so we're going to be getting into them, sharing resources, and just some basic ideas around co-planning. And I think that, the ideas around co-planning that we're talking about today is really kind of that next part of co-planning that we've been looking for since these shifts. We're talking today about reimagining the vision for ELLs and how to really set a new path forward. And some of what has been shared today, at least for me, has really resonated, that, exploitative empathy that Doreen shared this morning. How especially ESOL teachers, we tend to be helpers and we give so much of our time, but, hopefully with today, with these new thoughts around co-planning, we'll begin to be able to use our time more wisely. And I hope I said everything okay. So thinking of co-planning, a little warm up for you in the chat. What I'm going to do, I have 3 cartoons here that we've picked out for you. And I want you to think about which cartoon really, really is an example of your experiences with co-teaching and co-planning. So you'll look at the 3 cartoons and then decide which one speaks to you. So the first one is, sometimes I think the collaborative process would work better without you. So that's picture number 1. Picture number 2. Paul and I are gearing up to team teach for another course. So they're practically a 2-headed man. And picture number 3. So we thought we'd put in the details later, getting from here to there. I like to call number 3 the flying by the seat of your pants. So in the chat, just share a number. What's the majority of your experiences with co-planning?
Depends on the class. 2 to 3, 1, a couple more 2 to 3s. Depends on the co-teacher, absolutely. Varies with the co-teacher. Some 1, some 2. I'm hearing a lot depends on who you're co-teaching with.
Exactly. So we're all over the board. Any of you 2s, that's excellent. You know, we're hoping that we start moving into the 2 range more frequently, but 1 in 3s is typically what I find, at least, you know, when I co-taught, especially I think of one year when I worked with 6th graders and my 6th graders had 6 different ELA teachers. I definitely felt like a 3, you know, we're just flying by the seat of our pants. I've had times where I wanted to plan and my co-teachers didn't really have a plan. So we couldn't. So again, you know, we're all over the map, but hoping that we'll be getting to some ways for everyone to move more into the 2 section, because that's where we'd like. All right. So just quick up the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the role of the ESOL teacher, get into some high leverage practices for co-planning, take a look at some tools for co-planning, and do a reflection at the end. Real quick, we just always like to start with our core beliefs. I'm sure all of you, if you're in the ENL world, you've seen the blueprint for ELL success. So the blueprint for ELL success is, you know, we always like to center on the fact that all teachers are teachers of ELLs, and that we want our ELLs to have instruction that's grade appropriate and academically rigorous, with using their language proficiency as data, and their home language, right? Because bilingualism and biliteracy are assets. And then again, with the culturally responsive sustaining education framework, part of our core beliefs, we want to create student-centered learning environments. We want to foster critical thinking, elevate historically marginalized voices, and implement policies that incorporate equity inclusion in everything we do. I always like to start with those core beliefs.
So another little warm up we're going to do today. I don't know if anyone has ever used the Mentimeter. It's a great little engagement tool that you can use with your students. It is free. There is a paid version. We are using the free version. So what you'll need to do to participate is go to www.menti.com, and it will ask you for a code, and the code you're going to put in is 18338515. And I will throw that into the chat as well. This is the code. And I see we have some other participants who've used Menti before. That's awesome. What we're going to ask you to do, I'm going to get out of this PowerPoint for a second. Once you're into Menti, what I want you to do is, using one word at a time, how would you describe your experience co-planning and co-teaching for English language learners? So if you could only use one word to describe it, So what I like about Mentimeter is that it will create, this type of presentation will create a word cloud for you to see. If you want to get a general sentiment from your audience or from your students, it will create a word cloud with some of the words that are most prominent being the largest, and then surround it. It makes a really cute little graphic for everyone to see. So you should be able to enter one word at a time, and you can enter more than one word, but as long as it's one at a time.
Nikki, I think it needs to be open, the question.
It should be, but let me make sure. Oops, sorry about that. That will change the code. Oh, nope, it's the same code. Should be open now. How do we open this? 1 second here. Should be.
There we go.
Is it open now? Awesome.
Mine just opened, yeah.
So again, the code is 18338515. And then using one word at a time, how would you describe your experience co-planning and co-teaching for English language learners? And what's nice about this is you can kind of see live as we're going along what the general sentiment of the group is. I'm just trying to move this along. So we have rewarding, non-existent, frustrating. You notice the word challenging is big in the center there right now. It looks like a lot of us are having some challenges. Relationship, one-sided. So you'll notice that a lot of your sentiments and your one-word descriptions are going along with the cartoons that Shauna presented as well. Hard, rushed. Interesting. So it's oh, sorry, go ahead.
Like how somebody said fun. I want to be
Oh, yeah, that's great. Absolutely. There's some positive words coming out of our co-teaching and co-planning experiences as well. Great. Awesome. So I'm going to close this Mentimeter. Let's see. Do we have anything in the chat that anyone threw in? Nope. Okay. Awesome. So one of the first things that we can do when we're thinking about our roles, and it's interesting that this morning Dorina was talking a lot about our experience in setting boundaries. And so one way that we can also set boundaries is by kind of defining our roles. If we're working with an ELL teacher and a co-teacher in a classroom setting or a content setting, we kind of want to examine whose job it is to do what. And what's interesting for me is that one of the first times that I was teaching in a classroom, I was asked by my classroom teacher, what is your job? What do you do anyway? So I wish I had this background to be able to confidently say, this is what I do and this is my expertise. So we're going to play a little game. So in the chat box, you can use the letters E if you think it's the ESOL or the ELL teacher's job to do this. C for the classroom or content teacher, B for both, or N for neither. So I'm going to describe some tasks that you might find in the classroom, and we'll see, whose job it is to do what. So the first one is scaffolding materials for students. Whose job is it to scaffold materials for students? Is it the ESOL teacher, the classroom teacher, both, or neither? Seeing a lot of B's, that's wonderful. Absolutely. So the idea is that, the ESOL teacher may come in with the expertise on scaffolding specifically for the language levels of your students or the language proficiency of your students. But eventually we want to pass the torch and be able to share that experience with our classroom and content teachers. Awesome. And it looks like we all have the same general idea about that. That's great. So the next one is, whose job is it to translate documents for students? Is it the ESOL teacher, classroom teacher, both, or neither? Interesting. So I'm seeing kind of a mix of ESOL teacher and neither. So this one's kind of a tricky one, and kind of the one of the hot topics of my experience as an ESOL teacher. If you have the experience and the expertise to translate documents, that might be something you do as an ESOL teacher. However, it should be up to your school district to provide those materials for your students and families. And I'm talking about documents that pertain to what's going on in the classroom, school notices, things like that. Should be translated by your school district. So the answer really is neither. However, you may find yourself in a situation where your ESOL teacher does have some expertise and could provide that service, but it is not expected of an ESOL teacher. Awesome. So the next one would be, whose job is it to provide homework help for students? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of both and a few neithers. This one's kind of a trick question as well. While I do believe, that as ESOL professionals that we do provide a lot of homework help for students, what I wanted to portray when I created this question was the idea that the ESOL teacher in their classroom has lesson plans, just like a classroom or a content teacher would. So I would find myself a lot of times in a situation where my classroom teachers would say, oh, so-and-so needs help with this. Can you take it to Miss Bell and do it during ESOL time? And that was not appropriate because, like I said, we have prepared lessons for language proficiency. However, as an advocate for my students and a mentor for my students, I did find myself doing a lot of homework help after school and providing that. So both the classroom teacher and the ESOL teacher could provide that service for the students. So that was kind of a trick question as well. Awesome. You guys are doing great. So the next question is a common misconception. Whose job is it to speak the language of ELL students, so their native languages or their home languages? Seeing a lot of N's, that's wonderful. So I know we have a lot of ENL or ESOL professionals with us today, so that's great. The idea is one of the most common misconceptions is that the ENL teacher is responsible for speaking the language of the students. And that happens a lot in school districts where you have, one language happening within the school. So for example, I come from a rural school district where most of the ELL students were Spanish speakers. And because they've had ESOL teachers who were able to speak Spanish for a majority of the time, it was a conception that, it was the job of the ELL teacher to speak Spanish, when it was really, we were experts in English language, not other languages necessarily. Next, whose job is it to use research-based strategies to develop language acquisition? I'm seeing a lot of E's, so a lot of ESOL professionals. Awesome. Yeah, so this is where our expertise comes in. And this is what I like to emphasize when teachers ask me as the ENL professional, what is it that you do? What was your training in? My training was in language acquisition. So we can use those research-based strategies to help our students and to help them achieve. Next, whose job is it to communicate with ELL families? You all are really good at this game. This is awesome. So a lot of B's, a couple of B's with exclamation points. Yes, absolutely. So the idea is that it should be a shared responsibility. And I think in the last year where we've been in this strange COVID reality that we live in now, we're finding that that responsibility really does need to be shared between the classroom teacher and the ESOL professional. Is that the last question, Shauna? Oh, okay. So next we have, whose job is it to advocate for ELL students? A lot of B's. Awesome. So this is another one of those items that we hope that we can share this experience with our classroom teachers as ESOL professionals, that it's the job of everyone in the building. Absolutely, Ashley, it's everyone's job to advocate for our ELL students. Good point. Thank you. You guys did great with that.
Thanks, Nikki. I just think it's so important because, you know, as the theme that we've been talking about today, that it's hard to say no. We want to be the people to do everything that's needed for our students. But I think that's where the boundaries kick in because, you know, typically one person can't do the job, you know, of serving the ELLs for, you know, however many you have for the whole school or, you know, the whole district. So I think that being able to set those boundaries will help to make sure that more hands are on deck. So we're going to take a look at a classroom right now. So this video is from Coleraine, Colorado. It's called ELLs Belong to All of Us. And we're going to take a look at what is the role of the ESOL specialist in a collaborative planning environment. So as you watch, and you'll get a glimpse of, I think it's 5th grade planning session, you'll take a look at the video and consider what ways does the ESOL teacher contribute to the team's planning? So what's her role, what's her approach, her expertise, and her contributions? So I'll go ahead and press play.
It's a Wednesday morning at Mason Crest Elementary School in Annandale, Virginia. You won't find the 5th grade teachers in front of their students, though. They are at their weekly science planning meeting, preparing a lesson on the difference between vascular and non-vascular plants. Today's lesson was created by teacher Andrew Pratt.
A lot of the lesson is really unpacking the vocabulary word vascular, but then going a little bit deeper. You know, what exactly does that mean? Like, how are they using their vascular tissue?
Nearly half of the students at Mason Crest are English language learners, or ELLs. All of the 5th grade teachers have ELLs in their classroom, so an important part of today's meeting will be making sure that the ELLs will be able to participate fully in the lesson. Looking at the lesson from an ELL point of view is Katie Padilla, a specialist in teaching English to speakers of other languages, or ESOL. She attends all 5th grade team meetings.
So I tend to look at it from the eyes of an English language learner. So I try to look for the things that would be confusing or the things that aren't as obvious and that would need some kind of support. And then I suggest changes.
Ms. Padilla wants to make sure that ELLs will be engaged from the beginning of the lesson. She has a small change that will make a big difference.
The vocabulary word that we're going to be focusing on today, vascular. Where have you heard this word before? What does this word mean to you?
I would almost start with the question, have you heard this word before? Because some have not. So if we change the question to just, have you ever seen the word vascular? Well, then it's safe, because some people might say yes, but it's okay if I answer that question no, because it's just a yes or no question. If the first question automatically counts me out, then I'm not going to be as engaged in the lesson.
Katie brings so many good ideas, and she's constantly serving as an advocate for our English learners. She will sit there and she'll say, you know, I don't know if this assessment is really appropriate. Let's try an alternative assessment for them. Or she'll say, you need to back up a little bit, provide them with some more background knowledge, and then you can move forward at the pace you would like to.
The role of the ESOL teacher is to help build the knowledge and the confidence in our classroom teachers and the entire staff in the school, so that they have the strategies, the tools in their pocket to be able to support English learners throughout the day.
Next, Ms. Padilla looks for ways to tie the content of the lesson, the difference between vascular and non-vascular plants, to students' background knowledge and experiences. She will be pre-teaching some concepts and vocabulary words to a small group of students at lunchtime and shares her ideas with the group.
Tubing is good. Another one that our pre-teaching group is going to see today is straw, like thinking of a straw as a tube that they see every day.
That's cool.
So that they can make the connection of like, what does a straw do?
We were talking about the stem for the, when we were creating our diagram, I had a student say, this is like a straw, when we're transporting water from the roots to the leaves and the flower.
And that actually is the connection they used in 4th grade. They told me yesterday. The 4th grade teacher said a straw for the stem. Yeah. So that would be perfect.
Sometimes it's just that fresh pair of eyes who looks at something and says, oh, I think we could change this and make it better. And so I'm kind of that voice to say, oh, I think there's another way we can do this. And that doesn't always mean that that's the idea that's taken, but it's another idea that's presented that they can consider.
As we develop the lessons, she's there to give us those best practices that we can use for our language learners so that every single person on the team is providing those bridging services that allow them to access the curriculum. What's nice is those strategies also work well for the entire classroom.
She's able to offer certain strategies, do professional development within that meeting. It doesn't have to take place somewhere distinct and separate or outside of the building. So that's why those planning meetings are so important, because when we're sitting at the table together, she can share it as we're developing the lesson, reflecting on it, and tweaking it so that we can best modify it to support the needs of all of our language learners, because we have English language learners in all 4 classrooms.
Thanks to a commitment to collaboration embedded at Mason Crest in all areas of instruction and professional development, every teacher can contribute and support ELLs, not
just Katie Padilla. Sorry, I cut off. Okay, so after looking at this video, what were some of the ways that the teacher contributed? Right, yeah, I'm seeing your sentiments, yep. A couple of people have said, we do not have planning meetings like this. Absolutely, I think a lot of people don't, especially, where we are in the Midwest region, we have a lot of ESOL teachers who work with multiple co-teachers, multiple grade levels, multiple buildings, and this isn't always what you're going to see. However, she did have some really strategic approaches. So yeah, I'm seeing that she gave them a fresh perspective. The other teachers are learning from her, changing the questions. Yep.
Pre-teaching vocab. Absolutely.
Making connections to everyday life. And it's natural professional development. NYCD has weekly inquiry team meetings. That is fantastic. Thinking like an L, absolutely. So again, she was able to contribute to the team, to the planning in certain ways. So it was really contributing to the big ideas. And I really think that that whole idea of the professional development within the planning meeting is key, because as we're talking about, being empowering, we also want to empower our colleagues. So it's about, not just getting through the day, but trying to support people in becoming better teachers of ELLs themselves. So just thinking about, flipping the role a little bit. So thank you all for that feedback. Talk a little bit about the role of the ESOL specialist, because, I think throughout, especially since the 154 updates in 2015, the role is constantly evolving, and especially, in the last 6 years. So what is the role of the ESOL specialist? We talked a little bit about, what would be a responsibility, not a responsibility, what are some things that are shared. I took this image from a blog post from Ton Nguyen. If you're not familiar with him, empoweringels.com. He has so many great resources. But this particular post was 5 ways to co-plan when there's a time crunch. So many of you just said, oh my gosh, yeah, I don't have this. I would love to have a weekly planning meeting with a team, or, even a weekly planning meeting with the different teachers I work with. But when you don't have a lot of time, what are your options, right? So taking a look, thanks, yeah, we all love Don. So, thinking about the role of the ESOL specialist, one thing that we don't want to be relegated to is an aid, right? So the aid type of role comes about when we use what we call low impact co-planning. So, let's just get through today's lesson. Okay, what are we doing tomorrow? Can you do this bulletin board or this word wall? Or, oh, I need a graphic organizer for this one task. Those kinds of tasks don't really give you a lot of leverage, right? They don't get you, I guess, the most bang for your buck, to use an idiom. So that's what we would call low impact co-planning. Like, oh, can you just scaffold this assessment? Or, can you help grade these tasks? Instead of an aid, we want to be an equal designer of instruction as the expert in language acquisition. So we're hoping that people, especially if you're low on time, move towards high impact co-planning practices. So that's more about thinking of things from a bird's eye view. So designing projects, long-term groupings of students, designing assessments, creating rubrics, extended writing tasks, and reading, unit planning, and content mapping. So if we were visually to think of it, as Tan made in this graphic, we want to focus on the big rocks, not the little bits of sand, but focusing on the big rocks that we're putting in, because we can get more weight with that. Imagining we were putting the rocks or the sand in the bucket. And again, I think that this really helps us to, design the instruction in a way that, we can use our expertise as teachers of language. So again, high impact co-planning is what we want to move to. And again, thinking about what the experts say,
You can't hear my puppy party.
Somebody is, we're gonna have to, maybe Erica or Nikki can help with mute. So what do the experts say? Those of you, especially from Long Island, are familiar with Honingsfeld and Dove, and even here upstate, people know who they are. When we like to say, well, let's go to the people. What do the people say who wrote the books on co-teaching and ELLs? Because they wrote all the books. But one thing I did really like, and this struck me from the Virtuelle reboot, Dr. Andrea Honingsfeld, I'm going to focus particularly on what she says about co-planning. Just watch a little snippet here.
And since you asked about collaboration approaches or protocols or templates maybe that we often recommend, I'd like to circle back to that idea of having a week at a glance planning happening, because the day-to-day planning, what Maria said with the time management, is not going to be doable. It's not going to be happening. But if we have an overarching goal for the week, language goals, language and literacy goals, core content goals, and more important than ever, maybe social emotional goals for our students as well. So adding yet another level of integration to our work is to ensure the not just the physical, but emotional and mental well-being of our students as well. So the week at a glance kind of planning, and less is more. Less is really more. And I could say that now as Mrs. H, the mom who is here with kids, who is just, the amount of work that could be assigned to the kids, as opposed to what kind of teaching is really happening. We have to be mindful of how we can be intentional and purposeful when we co-plan and design meaningful learning activities for our students.
Okay, so I'm going to pause there. If you haven't seen this talk, a link is there for the Virtuelle reboot. It's free on YouTube. And Virtuelle is a series of PD that's developed by Tan Nguyen. So giving Tan another shout out. But I do really like the way that Andrea spoke about purposeful, right? We want to be purposeful with our co-planning. And that's where the advocacy comes in for ELLs. So thinking about, those high impact ways that you can co-plan, whenever I think about co-planning or I think about scaffolding for ELLs, I always, kind of revert to that backwards planning. So when somebody says, well, I have these newcomers, I'm not quite sure, how they're going to be able to do this unit. And I always start with, okay, what's the final assessment? What's the goal for the entire unit? And what are the big ideas? Less is more. I think a lot of times, particularly with students of lower levels of proficiency, it's okay for them to not do every single worksheet that the other students do. Or maybe there are a few tasks that they just don't get to. I've worked with teachers who said, but they have to do the entire packet. And, channel your inner Dr. Honingsfeld, less can be more sometimes. So again, it's advocating to kind of scale back what we're requiring our students to do and focusing on what is going to give them, the most in-depth learning, right? Because again, it's about the learning, not the tasks. So the high leverage practices, I know we mentioned them before, but again, these are topics that support multiple days of instruction. So instead, if I am co-teaching with somebody and we don't have a lot of planning time, maybe we have a once a month planning session. I know that they're doing this unit and, I can come with perhaps some scaffolding tasks or some word cards, or I can, plan some scaffold activities. So when I'm in the room, I'm able to support that student. Even if on a day-to-day basis, I'm not able to co-plan. So I just want you thinking a little bit about your own practice. So what are your big rocks? What are some classes where you co-teach? What are the big units of instruction or the way that instruction is organized that would help you to have those high leverage practices? And again, feel free to put things in the chat. You can also think about how can you co-plan for your big rocks? Yeah, seeing some time to plan together. So what are some big rocks that you would plan around? And I just thinking about that. And we are going to share some examples of how you can do some high leverage co-planning. So this is a co-planning template that was developed, I believe, by your Long Island Arborn colleagues. So Erica, was this you and Kelly Cordero that came up with this digital co-planning template?
That's right, it was. Thank you for acknowledging that.
No, well, we were so excited to see this because, this really gets to the heart of what we were speaking of where, okay, what are the big ideas? And so this digital co-planning template for the unit, I was really inspired by because I just thought that it could be a way for teachers to say, okay, let's take a bird's eye view and look at this unit. And this could be the case for people who don't have a lot of co-planning time. It could be the case for people who maybe only have virtual co-planning where you're filling this in online through a Google Doc or something. So the co-planning template gets into, what are the content and language objectives? What are some strategies that could be utilized, and what are some potential scaffolds for the student? Again, so the entire unit is thought about in advance instead of the day-to-day. So what we did is actually created an example, and I think Nicole is going to share a little bit of that with you.
So this was actually taken out of a unit that I completed only a year and a half ago. I'm the freshest out of the classroom, so I still had some of my lesson plans under my belt. So this was looking at 6th grade, and we filled it out as though Shauna was the ELA teacher and I as the ESOL professional. So the first thing we did was we looked at, what our content objectives were and what our language objectives should be based on those content objectives. So that's something that you could work out together. Maybe the content teacher provides the content line standards, and the ESOL teacher creates the language objectives from that. Splitting up the work is huge in such a time crunch. And I see, you know, looking at your messages in the chat, it looks like a lot of you are crunched for time. So from there, we looked, Shauna, can you scroll down just a little bit? Thank you. So we looked at some digital instruction strategy tools that we could use. So what, especially looking at synchronous versus asynchronous, and what materials we might need to provide in our lessons for students to access those technology tools. And then looking at scaffolds, the one thing that we did add, we were thinking about some more ways we could scaffold, and we added the native language column, and taking a look at you know, how we can utilize a student's native language or home language to provide meaning for their lessons. So there's, you know, the sensory graphic organizers that you could use, how are we grouping our students, and again, those digital resources that can help us scaffold for our students. So we're looking at the big picture and providing scaffolds throughout. And so one thing that was really helpful for me, and this is something that I actually did with my 6th grade ELA teacher, was kind of breaking apart based on, you know, the unit lesson plan that we had created, what our roles were and what our tasks were for each teacher. For example, you know, I would create the anticipation guide for this unit, which was all about facing your fears. And then from there, we would break up lessons so that we were sharing that experience in the planning experience. And, you know, we would know exactly who was doing what. And then, you know, there were some things that we had to complete together that we couldn't do alone. So these are times when we would meet in our strap time. So creating groups for the final assessment, planning a community circle, and planning the end of unit presentation rubric. So those are things that we would do together. And then I went even further. So I'm kind of a type A person when it comes to planning. So this was really helpful for me, was setting out dates. So, you know, by 11/4, we were going to read a short story called The Ravine. So the teacher that was responsible for lesson planning The Ravine would know by Wednesday, this is when we would need that part of the lesson. And we would focus on that for a few days. And, you know, I basically planned out each day so that we would be able to look at that later and work on those items separately, yet together. So hopefully that's helpful. We, you know, in my first few years of teaching, one thing that I did was try very hard to plan out each day purposefully, and it doesn't work like that. We're all waiting, you know, and strapped for time. So I think this co-planning template works a lot better in situations like this. And then one thing that I'm hoping we can work together as a team to help spread the news about is using native language as a scaffold. So since we added that scaffold, we thought we would throw this in as well. One question or scenario that I often come across when working with teachers in our region or in general is teachers who believe that, you know, classroom teachers that think that they need to translate everything that comes out, you know, all of their lessons, all of the worksheets that they give their children, all of the packets. And so I provided this kind of flow chart for teachers to kind of take a look at whether or not that scaffold is appropriate, because it's not appropriate for all students. So the first thing would be looking at whether or not the student is literate in their native language. And I know we have a lot of E&L professionals here that would probably kind of laugh and say, well, yeah, that's obvious. But, you know, I was in a situation once where I was working with a teacher who didn't have a lot of experience working with English language learners. And that teacher said, you know, they had to translate this, and that, and they translated all the Regent's questions and went on and was pretty angry about the amount of time that he was spending on all of that. And then when I asked if the student could read or write in Spanish, he looked at me and said, I don't know. So that would be my first question, is if this student can read and write in Spanish, then it might be an appropriate scaffold for that student. But if it's not, if they cannot read and write in Spanish or in another language, then that native language scaffold isn't appropriate. So looking at that flow chart from there, I'm trying to, Shauna, it's real small on my end. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, sir.
That's all right. Can you read what's under the yes there? You can-
I'm sorry. Oh, this
Okay.
is not an appropriate technique and should not be used with the student.
Okay, so if the student is literate in that language, then you would ask yourself, are the materials that you're going to provide translated by a reputable language company or a qualified human who can read and write in that language? And if the answer is no, then that shouldn't, that should not be the scaffold that you use. If it's yes, then yes, you can provide that scaffold for students. And there's a little asterisk there to remind everyone that Google Translate is not an appropriate tool for such work due to the inaccuracy and the confusion it can cause. Use Google Translate as a tool for communication when there's nothing better available, not a tool for translating documents and schoolwork.
Thanks. And also, since this new document came out from OBEWL and it's linked here, it's excellent. It's called Using Translations as a Support, Not a Solution. And it's several one-page documents that really break down, how to use the native language and when. Just going to give this one a mention. This is a week at a glance template for co-planning. So it is something that you may want to consider including. I think the digital one that we shared could also be used for in-person, right? But that says, that could be done for a 4 to 5 week time period, where the week at a glance, would be if you have the luxury of planning each week with your co-teacher. So I see that we're getting to the end of our time. The slides, all of the slides are available. Thank you for that. If you can, and I'll share in the slide that has the template, there's links that you can click on and access each of those documents. So they're all attached to the PDF slides. So anything's there, or you could contact us and we'll send them to you. So if you can, share either a red, a yellow, or a green. So just type in red if there's something that you need to stop doing after today, something that you need to slow down or start to question. You can type yellow in what that is. And a green is something you will try to do more of in your practice after today's session. So if you can, share a green, a yellow, and a red. You can just, if you want to type what those are, that would be excellent. We'd love to see what it is that you, what ahas that you had.
I see someone who's excited about co-planning with their math teacher. That's awesome.
Green, keep planning. I see it's, I don't want to keep you any longer, but again, here's our contact information. Feel free to reach out with us anytime. Thanks for having us, Long Island. Hope I'm going to come down in the summer for some Ralph's ices.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shauna. I just threw in the chat. I'm going to throw it again. The link to the evaluation. This way you don't have to go back to that Padlet should you choose not to. We thank you for being here as participants. We thank you, Sean and Nicole, for being here as presenters. We hope you had a wonderful Long Island Teachers Institute and a day full of learning and fun. Again, please complete evaluations for all of your sessions today, as it really does help us and guides us as we continue to plan for future professional development. So thank you again, and be well, everybody.